2018 Maine gubernatorial debate, sponsored by AARP Maine and the Bangor Daily News. And it begins right now.
And a good evening to you all. Welcome to the Vote 2018 Maine gubernatorial debate. You're going to hear extensively from the candidates in just a moment. First, though, we're aware, as you may be as well, that the BDN editorial board recently endorsed a candidate in this race. We want to stress up front that, as always, that editorial board did not participate in any way in the planning or moderation of this debate. CBS 13 works solely with the BDN News Department and political reporter Michael Shepard, who you will hear from tonight. And CBS 13 has vetted and reviewed all of the questions you'll hear tonight, including those that will come from AARP Maine. So with that said, right up front, on to the debate. And we want you to be an active part of it as well. Jennifer Long is joining me now with more on that.
Thanks, Greg. Over the next hour, as you watch the discussion live on our website or Facebook, you might have a question or a thought on this debate. And while you're not physically here, you can still voice your opinions. It is easy to chime in. Go to our page on Facebook. That is facebook.com/WGME13. You can also give your input on Twitter. Use the hashtag #YourVoiceYourFuture. I'll be watching both of those accounts all night. We'll be getting those questions and comments to our panel. For now, Greg, I'll send it back to you.
All right. Thanks very much, Jen. And let's jump right into the questions. The first one is about leadership tonight. What makes you believe that you are the best leader for Maine as opposed to one of the people standing next to you here tonight? And based on our random drawing before the debate, we begin tonight with the independent, Terry Hayes.
Thank you very much, Greg, and thanks to the other sponsors inviting us here this evening and the folks at home for tuning in. There's a significant difference that I bring to this ticket that my rivals do not. I'm a nonpartisan. I aspire to lead Maine from the perspective of what's best for all of us, not from one team or the other, or one tribe or the other. I think that's a significant difference. I made a commitment when I signed on to this that I would be independent, I would run on the Clean Elections program, and I would only be beholden to Mainers when I'm done and when I'm elected, so that we can proceed based on what's best for the state and not what's best for a special interest group, for folks who can write big checks, or for party subsets of folks across the state. So that is my commitment to you. That's a significant difference from my rivals here, and it's what I want voters to understand. I believe that's in Maine's best interest, because we'll move forward faster and in a much better tone for all of us if we're doing it from an inclusive place and not necessarily from a competitive one.
Thank you very much. And the same question to you, Mr. Moody, about leadership and why you think you're the best candidate.
Yeah, thank you, Greg. Leadership is what matters. I'm a servant-style leader. You know, I've been serving the public since I was like 15 years old, started in my mom's garage, went on to build Moody's as a coworker-owned company. 34% of our company is owned by our coworkers. And how to empower people, and how to incentivize people, and how to inspire people. And again, it's all about bringing people together, getting the ideas, and we build on each other's ideas. We don't try to knock each other's ideas down. So leadership matters. I'm the only person here that's actually a job creator, 40 years of executive experience growing a company here in the state of Maine, which isn't easy, but also leadership in the public sector. I've also been on the university system and community college boards of trustees, the only person in the state's history to serve on those two boards to get those two systems to collaborate at a level never seen before. So again, I've had the private sector success and track record, as well as the public sector. And that's what matters right now. You need both sets of skills. I really believe that 40 years of growing a business, a track record of success and leadership here in the state of Maine. I've got a 40-year track record of getting it done.
Thank you very much. And the same question to Janet Mills, a question about leadership.
Thank you, Greg, and thank you to the folks watching tonight on Facebook and live here in the TV studio. Look, I can only point to the people I looked up to as a kid in terms of mentoring and in terms of people I felt had leadership qualities. People like Margaret Chase Smith, Bill Cohen, George Mitchell, folks who've served in public office and who've exhibited leadership in so many ways. When Margaret Chase Smith stood up to Joseph McCarthy in the United States Senate, that was leadership. Bucking your party is certainly part of leadership, and also respecting consensus. I think I've exhibited leadership in the office of the Attorney General, standing up for Maine people when it came to protecting seniors against fraud, when it comes to protecting victims of domestic violence and sexual assault, when it comes to standing up to the big pharmaceutical companies and Wall Street giants like Standard & Poor's. When it comes to protecting Maine people, I've tried to take a leadership role, and I think I've done a pretty good job. I expect to become that kind of leader as your governor.
Let's go ahead and jump into the next question then as well. We've been hearing a lot, frankly, from voters and viewers about the political ads that are out there this season. In fact, I think we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about these here tonight. Some of them are very negative. Some of them come from your campaign. Some of them come from the campaign or from supporters of your campaign. So we want to hear from you tonight about some of these ads. Let's address them directly. And here's a sample of some of what we're talking about.
Liberal Terry Hayes. Hayes supports universal health care and far-left environmental policies and regulations.
As Attorney General, Janet Mills cut a plea deal with a sheriff's deputy charged with 10 counts of sexually abusing teenage girls. 10 counts. Mills let him avoid jail time. He's free.
He's lying about me to cover up what he's really about.
Shawn Moody doesn't want us to know that he would deny women the right to choose, or that he showed up at a woman's house and fired her just for having a baby.
All right, let's go ahead and get the thoughts of the candidates and reactions. You may choose to use your time to address one of the ads that talks about you, or maybe an ad that talks about one of your opponents, or both. It's your time, it's your choice. And based on our rotating format, we begin this question with Shawn Moody.
Well, I don't think any of us here, like the outside money that comes in, and some of these things are very concerning, the allegations, whatever they have. But I will say this. The ad that came, you got to look at the bottom, whose campaign it comes from. If it's an outside group or if it's actually the person's campaign. Everybody's watched these debates, forums, everything else. I have not said a bad word about any candidate or anything that they have done or addressed towards me. But I'll say this. Janet, you say right on camera, okay, that I said something that wasn't true. That was an ad that was put on by an outside group. So to me, again, 40-year history, you attack my personal credibility, reputation, and you're making it personal, and that's not right. We both know that these ads are coming from back channels that we can't control or participate in, and I would put my reputation. I've always treated women, everyone at Moody's, with respect and dignity, and the fact that you would make a slanderous comment about my credibility is just making it personal. It's not right.
Janet Mills, the same question.
Well, let me respond, because obviously the ad that the state Republican Party, who are allies of Mr. Moody's here, Shawn's, put up a very vicious ad that was completely untruthful. And I'm the mother of 5 daughters, grandmother of 2 little girls. I was disgusted by that ad. I've personally prosecuted hundreds of sex abuse cases, and if I'd been on the jury who heard the case against Mr. Hatch, I would have voted to convict, no question about it. To put up an ad that blames me for a case where there's a jury verdict and a judge involved was really completely untruthful. And I'm surprised you didn't call out the Republican Party, as did former Senate President, Republican Kevin Ray, and current State Senator Joyce Maker, Republican from Washington County. They called on the Republican Party to take that ad down. I'm surprised you didn't. The bottom line is, I'll put up my record of protecting victims of crime and protecting women up against anybody's on this stage.
Thank you very much. And before we get to any responses or discussion, let's go ahead and give Terry Hayes a chance to answer and discuss the same issue.
Well, thank you. I want to remind folks at home in particular that I'm the only clean elections candidate standing here and the only choice you'll have for governor running on the clean elections program. So I need to start by thanking you, because voters and viewers across the state have paid for my campaign. And I have never run a negative ad, and I never will. To date, as of this afternoon, combined, more than $250,000 have been spent by both campaigns as negative attacks on me. I figure you folks are smart enough to see through that stuff. I am not going to respond to the details. I've never run a negative ad, and I never will. I want you to know that this is part of the reason why I believe we need a nonpartisan leader in the executive branch, someone who's going to cut through this stuff and focus on what really matters and what makes the greatest difference for Mainers. This kind of bickering and these kind of attack ads make it so hard to transition to governing. And I've done that, and I want the opportunity to do it again for everyone across the state.
Thank you very much. And I see Mr. Moody would like to respond to something.
Well, this is really important. Janet and Terry, both. You guys know, you've been in the political arena for a long time. You're both, politicians, run for office. You know we don't have control. We have no coordination. And Greg, you can weigh in on this. You know what's going on. We don't have any coordination and cooperation on these outside money groups that are running these ads. When you look in the camera, Janet, and you look right in the camera and say, Shawn Moody's a liar, that's personal, that's slanderous. You go back to our campaign in 2010. I never said a bad word about anyone. I haven't this campaign. Me personally have not said a bad word. So I would just like to set the record straight, Janet. The attacks that are coming against you and me and Terry are done from outside channels. You know it. And I think you ought to apologize for going right in front of the camera yourself personally and attacking my character, my integrity.
I don't know why you don't call on your friends in the Republican Party, Jason Savage and folks like that, to take that ad down. You know that it's untruthful, so why not ask them to take it down?
Let me ask a quick follow-up as well. Let me direct this to you, Mr. Moody. I know that there's a non-disclosure agreement in the case that people keep talking about here. Can you say, though, in a general sense, have you ever gone to somebody's home to fire them?
And again, this is an interesting dynamic. We signed a non-disclosure agreement. That allegation was withdrawn. And to think the Attorney General, who's the highest law enforcement or, judge or, attorney, to condone breaking a contract, breaking, what's involved. We make contracts all the time with businesses, acquiring companies and things like that. We're not going to break our word. We're not going to break a contract, a set of precedents. Again, our word is worth something. But to just condone it's okay to break a contract in the state of Maine and not even let it bother the highest ranking attorney in the state, that's troublesome.
Let me ask a follow-up question of Janet Mills as well. Back to the case that is in this Republican Governors Association funded ad for the Maine Republican Party. Yeah. They specifically mention this Hatch case.
Right.
The jury, though, you mentioned the jury. The jury, is my understanding, waited on some of the charges and then were hung on the others. Did your office not have a decision or a choice to make to bring those other ones?
They acquitted this gentleman of 2 serious counts, and they were deadlocked on all the rest of the counts, and the judge made it clear that we could not retry the case. We didn't have that discretion. We didn't have that option. And that's all in public record. So, and as is the case that Mr. Moody talks about, what's in the ad that's up there now is all in the public record, all from the Portland Press Herald, Portland Phoenix, New York Times. But let's not get away from the subject of victims in general and women. I have stood up for the rights of women for my entire career, and I will continue to do so as governor. I have never changed my opinion, my position, for instance, on abortion. I've always been pro-choice, always. It's, Mr. Moody has run for governor more than either Terry or I has, actually. And 8 years ago, he said he was pro-choice. Now he's saying he's not pro-choice. It's fair game to point out that somebody's inconsistent on issues as important as that.
Your chance to respond, Mr. Moody.
That's totally not true. But here's the important point for the Maine people to think about. If Janet Mills is going to attack one of the most reputable fathers, family figures, community members, business people in the state of Maine, is going to attack me, what do you think she's going to do to you in running the state government?
Terry Hayes, did you want to jump in at this point?
I absolutely do. I want to respond. I'm a politician. A politician is a policy engineer. And frankly, you want someone heading the executive branch in the state of Maine who is a policy engineer, because that's the primary piece of the job. So when Shawn speaks about politicians being bad, I would suggest to you that you want a politician in that role. And I want to point out that these arguments, the kind of conversations what we've been stuck with so far, this is not going to get us where Maine needs to go. We need to be importing people with skills so that our economy can continue to grow. We need to be working on expanding broadband access and healthcare access, and that's what we should be talking about. And as your next governor, I'll be focused on those issues and not on the tribalism and the team sport, which I think is a significant distraction.
And again, to mention again for the folks at home, the number one thing I've heard people ask about and talk about have been these ads, which is why we're talking about these right now. And there's been confusion. When you have dueling ads, both making different claims, people are left confused. That's what we're discussing it here tonight.
Well, Greg, I want to point out, though,
please feel free,
if I could, that no one has approached me and suggested that I've done a negative ad. I've only heard positive things from the advertisement that my campaign has paid for. So again, it's a frustration to drag the attention because the negative ads are happening. I'm not criticizing the question. I'm saying that's precisely what I'm trying to stop, is this diversion and this distraction to something that gets in our way and holds us back. And that's why we need an independent.
And in fairness, let's get Janet Mills to have a chance to
I agree with Terry wholeheartedly. I'm happy to talk about the issues. One of the issues is who's going to be out there protecting the rights of women. I think it's fair game to talk about women's issues. whether it's choice or discrimination matters or other matters. And I've stood up for victims, and I've helped write some of the tough laws to protect the rights of victims and to help put people in prison for sex abuse of minors and adults both. And I've personally prosecuted hundreds of cases of that sort. So I stand on my record, and I'll put my record up against anybody's when it comes to protecting victims and supporting the rights of women in Maine.
And I'm ready to move on to the next question. Any final thoughts on what we've been discussing?
If you
Please.
can clarify, Greg, the ad that Janet is referring to that called me a liar was not produced or coordinated anyway. It can't be. It would be unethical. It would be an ethics violation by our campaign. I think that's an important distinction.
Do you agree that the ad is untruthful?
It is nothing. It's not coordinated with us. He's just avoiding.
If it's untruthful, then you should join Kevin Ray and Joyce Maker and other good Republicans in asking the Republican State Party to take it down.
All right, let's go ahead and move on to our next question. This one comes courtesy of our debate co-sponsors here tonight, AARP Maine, and they asked this: the majority of Maine residents want to age in place as they grow older. How will you specifically expand services and supports that allow more older Mainers to live independently in their homes and in their communities? Again, and I want to stress, this is separate from any of the ballot questions that may be out there. They specifically want to know about your ideas to deal with those who want to age in place. And again, our format goes to Janet Mills with this question.
Okay. Thank you for the question, and thank you to the AARP for participating in this debate. It's been a pleasure to work with members of the AARP over the last 6 years in particular in preventing fraud and educating people on how to prevent fraud. I've got a couple of plans. First of all, I'll sign the bonds, the $15 million bonds that have been sitting on Governor LePage's desk for 3 years. The bonds for senior housing to create more affordable housing and to weatherize many of the units that are already in place, and it makes seniors more comfortable and increase their ability to age in place. Also, in my economic action plan, you know, I've got several proposals to help seniors age in place. Age-in-place grants to willing communities to help make community buildings and residential facilities more accessible so that seniors can stay in place where they are. Targeting infrastructure upgrades for community buildings, and including churches and businesses. And secondly, the Launch the Drive Me service to help elderly citizens maintain their mobility through a phone-based ride-sharing program. Those kinds of things I think can help us. I'm pleased that several communities in Maine are already targeting seniors and becoming age-friendly communities, and I want to continue that effort across the state of Maine.
Thank you very much. Same question to Terry Hayes, please.
Thank you, Greg. You know, I have an elderly aunt who lives here in Portland. She lives up at 75 State Street, and she's been able to do that because members of our extended family put together the resources. And we cover 2/3 of the cost of that on a monthly basis because she didn't have her Social Security retirement. She was a nun for a number of years, and I'm very proud of my family that come together to say, what does she need to keep her safe and where does she want to be? And we've been able to do that because we're a large group. Nobody goes without anything in order to see that she has what she needs. Noon, that's a call out to you. So part of this, and part of what I'm suggesting is, as family members, we may have some obligation to help with this, but we have to focus collectively in the public side on expanding broadband, because that's connectivity. I mean, I live out in Buckfield in Oxford County. It's a lot different than living in downtown Portland. How do our seniors stay connected? Subsidizing transportation that will allow the seniors to be able to get their needs met when they can't walk to get them. And you need to stop me, don't you,
Well,
Greg?
your minute is up, but
Thank
finish
you.
your thought if you wish.
No, and there were several other ideas, but I'll wait and give the opportunity later.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Shawn, do you have
See
one
if I
minute
can
as well?
pick up where you left off, Terry. No, I think our elders, let's say, we've talked to a lot of folks, been on the campaign trail in the county, you know, all around the state. And people have worked hard their whole life. And they end up on a fixed income or a Social Security, a small pension, whatever it may be. The housing stock is getting older in the state of Maine. We donated space, what was called window dressers. We put window units inside older homes to increase the R value, cut down on heating costs, which is very expensive, you know, for folks living in their home. Another thing that I think is really important, we also gave Meals on Wheels, a vehicle Moody's donated to help elders, you know, get the food that they need. But as well as people get lonely when they're older. It's very important that we have the connectivity with the community to make sure our elders are checked on and have that personal contact and interactivity to help keep their psyche positive. And last, we've got to bring our young people back home to the state of Maine. There are tons of opportunities, employment opportunities here. I'm going to focus on that. What better way to take care of our elders and our seniors, to bring our young Mainers, former Mainers that left the state in search of opportunity back and revitalize our communities and take care of our families like we've done for generations.
And so it sounds like, again, to follow up, it sounds like regardless of what happens with question one, there is a statewide ballot question similar to this issue. Regardless of what happens to that, you are all saying that you're committed to at least some efforts when it comes to a very important and growing issue in Maine of aging in place.
Yeah,
that's correct.
There's no question, but I want to be clear on vote no on question one. I mean, we cannot afford another tax increase. We're almost the highest tax state in the nation right now. Property taxes are going up for our seniors. We've got to keep our property tax down so it doesn't force them out of their homes. So, yes, vote no on one.
Let's finish. Shannon Mills, are you also no on one?
Yeah, if you're talking about home health care in particular, let me just say, look, I had the experience of helping take care of my mother-in-law for 3 years. We moved her in when she came down with cancer, and helping with my father before he died, and my own husband, who was ill after a stroke for nearly a year before he passed away. So I know a little something about both aging in place and about home health care. And we're all against question one. We've all said we'd vote against question one. But it's important to look to what we can do. And I'm interested in looking at what the state of Washington is doing, what the state of Pennsylvania is doing, and looking at expanding our home and community-based waiver program to see if we can draw down more federal money to provide more home health care for seniors and people with disabilities now.
And let's let Terry have the final word on this since you asked.
Well, the other piece that I was going to mention is that although we are aging and we want to age in place, we still have many of the people in that age bracket as we get older still have things they want to contribute to the community, and making it easier to continue to involve them. They have an awful lot of wisdom. So just because we're getting older doesn't mean that our value proposition has been expended.
All right, thank you to all the candidates on that issue. The AARP Maine thanks you as well, I'm sure. As I mentioned, we're also partnering tonight with the Bangor Daily News. And here now to ask our next question, I want to send things over to Mike Shepard and welcome into the debate.
Thanks, Greg. The new governor's first job will be to craft a two-year budget. During his tenure, Governor LePage has targeted income tax cuts while indicating openness to offsetting sales tax increases. How will Maine's tax picture change in your first budget?
All right, thanks very much, and we'll start this question with Terry Hayes.
Thank you very much, Mike. I put out my proposal and outline for an economic development plan earlier this week, and it includes a number of specific objectives, and one would be over the 4-year term to bring the income tax down, the top rate down to 5%. And the path to doing that is precisely what's been tried first by the Democrats and then by a Republican governor, which is broadening the sales tax and exporting some more of the sales tax piece to our visitors. And that's going to be a significant part of what I will be proposing. Again, there will be 2 biennial budgets that Maine's next governor will have the opportunity to submit. And the first one will include the steps to that. The idea is to try to get there by the time the term is over with. Right. That's my goal, and that's how I see the picture looking different. But I also think it's going to be part of an overall economic development plan, Mike, which means that I have to be welcoming of other people's ideas of how to get there. I think the goal is something that all would embrace as long as it doesn't result in decimating access to necessary services. So I'm looking for collaboration. Thank you.
Same question to Shawn Moody.
Yeah, I think you want to just break it right down in the most simplest forms, running your own household. Okay, you've got X amount of dollars coming in, you got X amount of dollars going out, and that's really what we got to look at in the state budget. Right now, the last 2 or 3 months, we've had record state revenues. Okay, think where we were 8 years ago. $750 million hospital debt, almost double-digit unemployment, $1.3 billion pension crisis. Look where we are today. Full employment, our economy's growing, we're creating jobs. That's exactly what I'll continue to do, being a job creator, the only one private job creator here running in the race. Grow our economy, continue to grow the jobs, which raises revenue, tax revenue the right way, without raising taxes. It raises the revenue. Now on the other side of the equation, we're going to reduce the cost, okay, of administrative burden in our state and our local communities. We took $80 million of administrative overhead and back office out of the University of Maine system, and we can do that across state government. So lower our overhead and increase revenue by increasing our job opportunities, business growth here in the state of Maine. And in between there, that's how we're going to reduce our taxes.
Thanks very much. Janet Mills, same question to you, please.
Well, thanks. First, I'd want to talk about my economic action plan for Maine, which does focus on small businesses in particular in an effort to expand the economy in Maine. We know from reading the Department of Labor's own report from last month that we're looking at basically stagnation in job growth 0 job growth over the next 8 years. That's an important target for the next budget. And the first may be a supplemental budget to deal with issues in the current year of the biennial. Usually that happens when, if you've underfunded, for instance, public health infrastructure, if you're looking at more caseworkers for protective services for children, those kinds of things. So we'll deal with that. But the overall tax structure, I'm not inclined to change it at this time. You know, we made some motions that way when I was in the legislature a dozen or so years ago, and in a revenue neutral fashion, trying to find ways to target people visiting Maine. I'd like to see the circuit breaker reinstated in a more robust way to help property taxpayers, because I've met too many people who are having to leave their homes because of the burden of property taxes.
And I see Mike Shepard has a follow-up question.
Yeah, for Shawn. Governor LePage has released a budget outline that would collapse Maine's 3 income tax brackets to 2. Lower rates of 4.5% and 6%. Do you support that, and would it have to be offset with higher taxes? Just want to drill down on you on that.
Yeah, I absolutely would support on lowering the tax rates here in the state of Maine. And again, the only way we're going to get there, is to continue to raise revenue through job growth and business expansion, as well as reducing our overhead, the size and scope of state government, and just reduce our administrative overhead. We've done it, University of Maine system, $80 million recurring a year. The administrative savings are there.
To follow up then on what Mike just said, though, the governor has supported maybe some broadening of the sales tax. You do not in any way, shape, or form support that.
I don't. As a matter of fact, when Janet served in the legislature, this is another, just bring this out to light, because I think Maine voters need to know about it. When she looks in the camera and talks about, not raising taxes on the middle class, the fact is, when she served in the legislature, she did. She raised the taxes on milk, which hurts our dairy farmers, hurts our middle class, on soda, haircuts, medical claims, which increases the cost of health care. So I think it's important to note that, you can say whatever you want, but behavior doesn't lie. And I think the fact that had that history of raising taxes on the middle class, Gina, got to be honest with the people of Maine.
Your chance to respond.
I think I should respond to that, because I think you're talking about a bill. Maybe you could identify the bill, but the only one I can think of is one that was 12 or 14 years ago that would have reduced the income tax to about 6%. And in exchange for which, something like what Governor LePage is proposing now, expanding the sales tax to certain services, primarily services that focus on out-of-state people, but reducing the income tax. It was revenue neutral. That's what we talked about 12, 14 years ago. I'm not interested in raising taxes. I've said that repeatedly, and I'll produce a budget that does not raise taxes.
All right, as I mentioned at the start of this debate, we are also getting questions through our social media desk. Let's go ahead and get to my colleague Jennifer Long for more on that.
Yeah, Greg, a lot of people chiming in on Facebook and on Twitter. We actually have a few hundred people commenting on the Facebook live stream that we have going on our Facebook page. And as a reminder, you can use the hashtag #YourVoiceYourFuture to chime in. A key thread that I'm finding here is immigration. A comment here from Marfine. All of you have voiced support for immigrants, but when push comes to shove, will you follow policies put in place by the president? We also have another question from a viewer, similar along the lines of immigration. I'd like to hear about sanctuary cities here in Maine. Ryan believes we don't need them, but Greg, could you pose that question to our panel?
All right. He obviously has an opinion on it as he tosses the question out, but let's go ahead and start with Mr. Moody. Your opinion on immigration. I know that could be a federal issue, but certainly some state and local issues on that as well, and perhaps that question about sanctuary cities as well.
Yeah, we would not support sanctuary cities. I do support the president in securing the borders. Look at the people that are streaming up to try to they're headed for Mexico, U.S. border. I mean, and the president has reacted to that, responded to that with the troops going down there. We have to have secure borders. What else has the country got? We don't have secure borders. It's a priority. But I will say this, because this is very important. Let's look at the immigration population that we have right here currently in Maine. And immigration built this country. Make no mistake. We have immigrants coming over that actually have a visa. They've been properly vetted, from a security standpoint. They have to wait from 12 to 16 months to get a work permit. That's not right. I've talked to the population of immigrants. They're frustrated. They're anxious. They're depressed. They want to go to work. They had a job where they were living. We had career counselors, find out what their occupations were, and get them on a track to employment. Our employers need help. Right now is the perfect time to solve this local immigration problem, which is putting a strain on general services, all that cost, food, housing, you know, we have to give them general assistance while they're waiting to get a work permit. I'll guarantee you one thing. When the immigrants came to Munjoy Hill a generation ago, 2 days after they landed, they were laying block.
All right. Thank you very much. Janet Mills, the same question to you.
Well, I don't know about 100 years ago, but I know that right now the federal government is dragging its feet, terribly dragging its feet in processing people's applications for asylum, for refugee status, for green cards, etc. That's a tragic situation. In Maine, we need, from one report, we need about 60,000 people to move here to take the jobs that are available now, and we don't have that in migration right now. I've talked with a number of people from war-torn countries in Africa and other nations and other continents, and they're here seeking opportunity, seeking hope, seeking prosperity, seeking an education and a better life for their families. And we need their expertise. Many of them have graduate degrees. I understand that about 40% of the new Mainers in the Portland area alone have a bachelor's degree or better. That's an important contribution to our workforce. So we need two things to help with immigration. One is language facilities, greater adult education for English second language services, and two, accreditation for the value of their experience and credits in other countries. We have families here from Iraq and Afghanistan who have stood by our soldiers and helped save our people in those war-torn countries, and they need our help now too.
Thank you very much. Same question to Terry Hayes, please.
You know, Greg, I've been on the campaign trail, this 18-month-long job interview with about 500,000 Mainers since May of last year. And the most moving emotional experience I've had in that time was attending a naturalization ceremony down in Saco at an elementary school earlier this spring. There were over 150 new Americans that took the oath of citizenship that day. And there was no representative from the administration present from our executive branch. There were several members of the legislature that were there. There were folks there from over 50 different countries, and I made a promise to myself that day that as Maine's next governor, I will attend every naturalization ceremony that happens in the state of Maine. I have to tell you that from my perspective, immigrants are going to save our economy because we can't birth our way out of our demographic challenge. It just takes too darn long, okay? And we've been in this circumstance before. And so we should know how to do this. We should have learned from our past experience, but we need to welcome skilled workers, legal immigrants, legal asylum seekers, and provide for them until we get out of their way. They don't come here because they want a handout. They come here because they want the American dream, and no one's expecting they're going to get handed that. They're going to earn it. And I say we need to put supports in place that allow them to do exactly that.
And none of the candidates mentioned this, so I'll go ahead and do it for our viewers at home. By the purest definition of sanctuary city, it means a community in which the police force is not cooperating with federal agents on these kinds of issues. To my knowledge, there's not a single community in Maine that's doing that, so there's no sanctuary city in Maine at the moment. Hey, we got to take a quick break at this point. We'll be right back, including a segment in which the candidates will have a chance to ask each other a question. We'll be right back.
Okay.
Oh, good. All right. And welcome back, everybody. We now move to the portion of our debate in which the candidates have a chance to ask one other candidate a question. The candidates can set up their question, but they've been instructed not to have a short speech in the form of a question. That's not what we want. We want to get to the question and the answer. And based on our rotating format, Janet Mills, you have the chance to ask the first question.
Thank you. Let me ask Shawn something. A few months ago, Governor LePage joined a lawsuit in Texas which would move to strike down the entire Affordable Care Act, including the protections for pre-existing conditions. Given that that federal law covers tens of thousands of people in Maine under the self-insured programs that don't come under Maine law, would you, do you agree with his support of that lawsuit?
Well, I'm not familiar exactly, I'm not following the litigation aspect of that, but I think I understand your question. And number one, obviously we cover in our company, we cover pre-existing conditions, the law, federal and state law, so I would not support changing that in any way. I appreciate the opportunity to clarify that, because that, again, has been one of those attack ads. And I think it's important to note, we have health insurance to cover close to 200 people and their families. We created a self-insured plan that saves us now 20%. So I understand what it's like as a sole proprietor buy insurance, in a company that's over 50 people, and now we've become self-insured. And that's why I want to offer the small business community here in the state of Maine to be able to buy group insurance across state lines so they can get a good deal and get a competitive price, which they can't get right now.
Janet Mills, did you want to respond to any of his answers?
The lawsuit would just completely do away with those protections for thousands of Maine people who fall under the federal law, not state law. So I guess my question is, would you join that lawsuit as he has?
And again, I'm going off what you said, Janet, but if it led to not being able to cover pre-existing conditions, of course not. We have to cover pre-existing conditions as we do now, and we do in our company for our coworkers and their families.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Terry Hayes, you have a chance to ask another candidate a question at this point. Or you can weigh in on what was just discussed if you wish.
No, I wasn't listening.
All right, fair enough. You get a chance to ask another candidate
I was
a question.
preparing my question, Greg.
Please do so.
And trying to decide whom I would ask it to. So I guess, Janet, I'm going to ask it of you. I received today a copy of a mailer that your campaign directly put out that indicates that a vote for Terry Hayes is no different than a vote for Shawn Moody. I'm just anxious to hear you defend this. Apparently, I'm not independent from your perspective. So could you please help me understand how if someone votes for me, they're actually voting for Shawn? Because I don't understand
that. I think from what I've read in the newspaper, let me just explain what I've read in the newspaper. And that is that people might vote for you instead of me. And the conventional wisdom from folks like Mike Shepard and other commentators is that your votes might take away from me. And I think that's probably what the gist of that mailer is.
So may I, Greg?
Please.
So that presumes that I only have one vote in this race. I've already cast it. You only get one vote. Shawn only gets one vote. What makes you believe that you have a right to some other pool of votes that somehow I'm taking them away? I'm a candidate. I've been on this ballot longer than any of you. I signed up first. I qualified for the ballot first. And when I read this stuff promoted by you, you called me on Labor Day and said, Terry, I'd never discourage you from running in this race.
And
you qualified for it. Well, but you're suggesting that I don't earn a vote. And if I do, I'm stealing it from someone.
I would never discourage you from running, and I've said that. And I can only repeat what Alan Karen said the other day. Excuse me, that the danger of an independent in this particular context is to allow the Republican to win. That's what other people are saying, Terry.
Well, it presumes, again, that someone other than the voter controls their own vote. That's the part that I'm sitting here and saying, wait a second here. I can win if I get more votes than either one of you. That's the deal. That's how this works. Whoever comes out on top wins. And I'm not stealing anybody's votes by putting my hat in the ring and competing legitimately for this opportunity to lead Maine. And you'll never see anything like this from me, discouraging anybody who's qualified for the ballot from giving it their best shot. This is not how you deal with a job application. Those of you at home are going to be the ones making the hiring decision on Tuesday. And I'm telling you that I'm not going to do any kind of negative stuff because I'm going to compete based on my assets and what I bring to the position.
Janet Mills, you wanted to say
No,
one more
I
thing
appreciate your running, Terry. I've always said you have every right to run. You've qualified for the ballot. There's a difference in arguing about whether you have a right to run versus whether people should vote for you. I'm saying they shouldn't vote for you.
Fair enough. Shawn Moody, you have a chance to either respond to this or...
I would, because I think it's linked into what I said earlier to the Maine people. Terry, is that by Janet Mills' campaign?
This one is, yes.
Yeah, and that's what I'm talking about. See, folks need to really understand this. If it says Republican governor or Democratic governor, we don't have control. We have no coordination. Ethically, we can't. It would be illegal on those attack ads. We don't like them. It's happening. However, when the candidate sends it from their own campaign themselves, they do have full control over it. They do authorize it. It says right on there. So she authorized that to go out. And I think it's important when it comes to honesty and integrity, when you look at the candidates, who is going to tell the truth and who's going to make up some lies, whatever they got to do to try to win.
I'll extend to Janet Mills for one last point.
I'm not going to argue about ads. The point is I'm running on my own merits. I'm running a campaign that tells the people of Maine that I will work for health care for all Mainers, that I will work for an economy that rewards hard work. I have a plan, an economic action plan. If you want to know what I stand for, look at that plan. Look at what I've done in my career. Look how I've stood up for Maine people. Your vote is your own vote. Everybody has a right to run. But I'm asking people to look at my record and look at what I plan to do and what I've done in standing up for Maine people, especially the last 6 years as your Attorney General.
And
Greg, I need to say.
Last word, please.
I need to say, Janet, if you're running on your merits, there's no reason for you to be talking about me whatsoever. There's no reason for you to be running a negative ad about me. I have not run or spoken ill of either of you or the others who were running. There were 24 of us at one point. You can't find evidence of me being critical of any of them because we're job seekers. That's our role. And you folks at home are going to make that hiring decision. And I'm suggesting that if you're running on your merits, then you talk about yourself and you don't do this kind of stuff to take down other job applicants. I've never talked smack about another job applicant in my life, and I'm not going to start now.
And I'm ready to move on, and let's move on. And again, we can continue the conversation. But Shawn Moody, you have yet to have a chance to ask a question. Now you may have your chance to do so.
I would just say, again, trust and integrity is a critical component in leadership. I mean, if you can't trust and respect the person that's going to be the leader.
Again, if you get a question, though.
Yes. Okay, that's a segue. I apologize. So, Janet, this is a question for you. You served in the legislature, back in, was it 04 to 08, whatever it was. And you're on the Appropriations Committee, which is a key committee in terms of spending. 2010, when the Republicans took over, it was a disaster. The financial condition of this state was a disaster. So how do the Maine people trust that you're not going to go back to the tax and spend habits that you folks had in the legislature during those times?
There's a negative ad right there. Listen, I was on the Appropriations Committee for 4 years. I was Attorney General in 2010. I was elected in 2008 to the Office of Attorney General. I was not in charge of the budget. And you might remember that there was a nationwide recession in 2008, 2009. I served on the Appropriations Committee for 4 years, up through 2008, during some of the toughest years of Maine's economy. And we fashioned 7 budgets in 4 years. They were not easy to do, but we did it by working across the aisle, by working with Republicans and other caucus members to make sure that we didn't let down the people of Maine. 7 budgets in 4 years. We cut, but we managed to maintain the basic safety net for Maine citizens and basic funding for education, which was so critical, because we knew that the people expected us to work together and get the job done. It's fortunate that Maine is now starting to recover from that recession, although we're the slowest to recover of any New England state. Our personal income level is low. Our household income is one of the lowest in New England, and I want to address that. And the fact that we have 0 job growth we're looking at for the next 8 years, those are things we've got to address.
Your chance to respond, Mr. Moody.
I would just say, okay, so we had Democratic control, and it was the worst, in financial terms, it was the worst of times. We switched over to Republican control, and now economically, it's been the best of times. Let's continue that.
That's a speech.
Terry Hayes, did you want to jump in on this topic? Your choice.
Thank you.
All right, fair enough. Janet Mills, any final words you'd like to have on this topic?
No, look, I think I've run an executive agency with a $42 million budget for the last 6 years and then some. And I've worked on the state budget. I think that's an important credential to know how bills are passed, know how budgets are done, where the money's coming from, how to hire and fire, how to do personnel, and administer things in state government. I'm not going to walk away from that experience. I think it's a valuable asset. As Terry said, it's a job interview. I think I'm qualified and I've got the best credentials.
All right, we now want to move on to another question from AARP Maine. That question is this: with prescription drugs continuing to skyrocket, what steps do you plan to take to ensure that older people and their families have affordable access to their life-sustaining drugs? And we want to start this one again with Terry Hayes.
Thank you, Greg. You know, this is a persistent challenge, and you know, at the top of my to-do list would be to create a healthcare system that diminishes the need for these kinds of drugs. I mean, we are oftentimes over-medicated because we haven't necessarily cared for ourselves to the best of our ability. And I know there are folks that need the drugs. I'm not suggesting that there aren't. But if you look at the use of prescriptions and you look at them over time, there's been a dramatic increase. It's as though we think that everything has a pharmacological solution. So the first thing I want to look at is what's driving that. And we saw an outcome with the opioid crisis created just precisely because of overscribing for folks. So let's look at the broad picture. That's the first thing I would say. And the second is negotiation. I mean, we're a big purchaser in terms of public money that goes into the healthcare system for pharmaceuticals. And I would absolutely focus on how we can negotiate those prices down. So we need to find ways to use less of them without diminishing the wellness of our population and negotiate a bulk purchasing so we can bring the cost to our citizens down.
Thank you very much. Same question to Shawn Moody, please.
Yes, I mean, the big pharma, the FDA, I mean, there's a huge responsibility there to actually, you know, capitalism isn't always pretty. You know, they're pushing those drugs, pushing those prescription drugs onto, you know, people with chronic pain, back injuries, things like that. They knew years ago it's highly addictive. The opiates are a highly addictive drug, and most people, once they run out of prescriptions, can't afford it, then they go on the street to get the street drugs cheaper, you know, heroin or whatever. So there's 2 or 3 things that we need to do. Obviously, we need to focus, and that started the process of bringing this out into the light of day. Make sure our medical providers, our practitioners are not overprescribing medications. But I found something out interesting the other day. Now we're getting 40 or 50% of these opiates that aren't being used at all. They're in medicine cabinets because people are frightened, which they should be, of taking them. So they may only take 3 or 4 pills and they sit in the cabinet. So we participated with Gorham Police Department of the Take Back program, help them install that right there in the lobby. So we had to make sure that we get these drugs, the prescription drugs are in these medicine cabinets, cleaned up, back, disposed of properly so that they're not subject to being sold on the street and falling in the wrong hands.
Thank you very much. Same question to Janet Mills, please.
I'm sorry, Greg. What was the question exactly?
The question was about what's your plan to help the families afford their life-saving and sustaining drugs as the prices continue to skyrocket?
Senior citizens in
Correct.
particular? Okay, thank you very much. Look, when I was on the Appropriations Committee, 2 of the programs we saved, which the LePage administration has undercut completely and taken thousands of people off, were the Drugs for Maine's Elderly program and the Medicare Savings Program. You know, when the Congress, under previous leadership, enacted Medicare reforms, they refused to allow governments and entities to negotiate over prescription drug prices. So instead, we have the people in the donut hole, seniors on Medicare who can't afford certain drugs, and we saved those programs throughout my tenure on the Appropriations Committee. They've been undercut now. I would bring them back. And I would also look to what Vermont is doing. And Utah today has a pharmaceutical tourism program where they're paying for people to go to Mexico to buy their drugs, same pharmaceuticals there, bring them back because it's so much cheaper. Look at what the state of Maryland is doing in trying to set pharmaceutical prices for all of its citizens. Those are things I'd like to look at and enact as governor.
Thank you very much for your answers to that. I'm ready to move on if the candidates are as well. At this point, we're moving on to what we call the lightning round. It's our chance to ask a series of rapid-fire questions, cover as much ground as we can. They're designed to be pretty much yes or no or similar short answers to that, so please resist the urge to answer at length. And we'll get to as many as we can, going left to right and then right to left and so forth. Let's begin if we can. We start with a viewer question. This one came from Larry on Twitter earlier today. As governor, would you support President Trump if asked by sending the Maine National Guard to the Mexican border? Yes or no, Terry Hayes?
No.
Shawn Moody?
Absolutely.
Janet Mills?
No.
Maine's referendum system. Do you think it's too easy to get a question on the ballot, too hard, just about right? We'll start with Janet Mills.
Too easy or too hard?
Too easy, too hard, about
There's
right.
some reforms I would support, but no, I don't think it's too easy or too hard.
Shawn Moody.
It absolutely needs to be reformed. We need to have representation throughout a rural state as well as just our cities.
Fair enough. Terry
I've
Hayes.
proposed a solution to the problem.
Ranked choice voting is not happening in this race, but do you believe it's a good idea or a bad idea for Maine? Terry Hayes.
I support it. I voted for it.
Shawn Moody.
No.
Janet Mills.
Yes.
If this race were decided by ranked choice, who would be your second choice? Janet Mills.
Oh gosh, I don't know. I asked that question to Terry the other night, and she wouldn't answer it, so I'm not sure I can answer it either.
Shawn Moody.
Well, it's not in play, but I would just say it's not constitutional. That's why it's not in the gubernatorial race. It should have been vetted properly. We wouldn't be dealing with it.
Terry Hayes.
You're the third person to ask me that question, Greg, and I have not answered it for anybody.
I see it continues here tonight. Canada recently approved recreational marijuana. Maine's done the same thing. Will you make getting year one of your administration a priority to get a recreational marijuana marketplace set up, which so far has not happened? Is it a priority for you, Terry Hayes?
It's the law, and we're going to take an oath. I'll take an oath in January, and I will implement the law.
Shawn Moody.
We got to write the rules. We got to be very careful on writing the rules to make sure we keep our young people safe, people out there driving on the street.
First year or not first year, in your opinion?
We're going to work hard on the rulemaking. That's a priority.
Janet Mills.
First year indeed, because now it's the underground economy that's ruling the roost, and with marijuana you've got to test it, track it, and tax it. And the regulations will be made. They aren't being worked on now. They should be.
Janet Mills, do you support creating a so-called safe injection sites around Maine as a way to reduce drug overdose deaths?
You know, unfortunately, nobody's been able to do that successfully because of federal law.
So that's a no at this point.
That's a no.
Shawn Moody.
No, you get spreading diseases. No.
Terry Hayes.
I have other priorities for addressing the drug addiction challenge.
Curveball here for you. What's your favorite place to take a vacation when you get a chance?
The St. Croix River, which is our boundary with New Brunswick.
Shawn Moody.
Rockwood, Maine.
Janet Mills.
Oh, Baxter Park.
Name somebody who inspires you. Janet Mills.
Dead or alive?
Dead or alive.
Senator Margaret Chase Smith.
Shawn Moody.
My grandfather used to come up every day when I was about 18 and say, how come that car's still in here? Get this thing, get him in, get him out.
Your grandfather.
That's inspiring.
Very good. Terry Hayes.
My grandmother, who's been passed for a number of years now, and my children.
There's a good chance we're going to see assisted suicide referendum on the ballot 2019. There's a chance of that anyway. Let's ask it right now. Are you for or against assisted suicide? Terry Hayes.
I don't know. I haven't read the bill.
I'm against it. We have good hospice care. My mom went through, hospice, and they do a great job.
Janet Mills.
I'd like to see the language. I support the free will of people to make their own decisions, but I want to protect elderly and people with disabilities, make sure they're not exploited under such a bill.
It is, in fairness, a complicated question.
It is.
Greg, are we doing this lightning round still?
We're still doing it. We're happening.
Slow
Would you
lightning.
support, all right, we'll make it more lightning if we can. Janet Mills, would you support allowing Maine cities and towns to have a local option sales tax, yes or no?
I'm considering it. I haven't come down finally
Shawn
on
Moody.
that.
That's a slippery slope. I don't want to increase taxes, period.
Terry Hayes, let's see if you can get a yes or no on this one. All right, very good. Do you own any guns? And if yes, is it for recreational or sport?
I do not.
Shawn Moody.
Yes, and it's for recreation, hunting, and outdoors.
I should say for recreation or protection, actually would have been a better way to say that. Okay.
Both.
Janet Mills.
I've declined to answer that question before,
Fair
As
enough.
a single woman, I'm just not going to tell people whether I have a gun at home.
All right. Last question. Red Sox just won the World Series. Ever been to Fenway Park?
Of
Janet
course,
Mills.
of course.
All right. Shawn Moody.
I love the Red Sox. Yes.
Yes.
All right, very, very good. There was fairly lightning there, and some of that, there's answers. And again, some of those issues are obviously complicated, and we appreciate your forthrightness in answering them. Let's get to our closing statements at this point. Candidates have 1 minute to give a closing statement tonight, and based on our format, Terry Hayes, you will begin.
Thank you, Greg. Thank you to the AARP, to WGME and Fox here in Portland, to the Bangor Daily News, and to the viewers who invited us into their living rooms this evening for the last hour. My name is Terry Hayes, and I want to be your next governor. I believe Maine needs an independent, experienced, and collaborative leader at the helm. I think that the partisanship has really taken its toll on our policymaking. We've continued to campaign right through election night and keep right on going. We've been doing that since 2012, and I think it's time to stop. Our problems, the challenges that we have as Mainers, they're not partisan. They don't affect only one party or the other. They affect all of us. And I don't think the solution should be partisan either. I've been elected twice by Democrats, Republicans, and Independents in the state legislature to serve as state treasurer. They trust me to steward the state's, all the state's money, frankly. You can trust me as your next governor. So my challenge to you is, when you vote on Tuesday, please vote to celebrate your aspirations and not to be defined by your fears. Vote for Hayes for governor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shawn Moody. You have 1 minute as well for your closing.
Thank you, Greg. Thank everyone for hosting this. Maine voters have an important decision to make on November 6th. I'm the only candidate in this race that has over 40 years of executive experience, creating jobs and growing Maine's economy. I'm an outsider. I'm a businessman. I'm a family man. Now is not the time to turn Augusta back over to the politicians. Politicians would like you to believe that they have the answers to all our problems. The fact is, the politicians are the cause of our problems. Some say you can't run the state like a business. I say we can't afford not to. I can't wait to roll up my sleeves and go to work for you. I'm asking for your vote on November 6th. Maine's best days are ahead of us. If we work together, let's get it done. And one final point. When you look at the situation the state was in 2010, with the hospital debt, the pension crisis and everything else, ask yourself, were you better off then or you're better off today? Vote for me, and we're going to move the state forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Janet Mills, the final word in our debate
Thank
tonight.
you, and I want to talk to the people of Maine, to the fishermen in Port Clyde, to the engineer in Orono, and to the teachers, nurses, firefighters, and police officers everywhere across the state, and shipbuilders at Bath and the mill workers in Rumford, to people in recovery everywhere, and to the laid-off workers in Machiasport, to my 5 lovely daughters and my grandchildren. This election is not about me. It's not about the noise on TV and radio and in the newspapers. It's not about personalities. It's about you and your future. Will you vote on Tuesday to turn back the clock, or will you vote for a future that's bristling with hope and opportunity and prosperity? As governor, I'll fight for you, for health care you can afford and an economy that rewards hard work and quality education. I'm running for governor because I know the best chapter in Maine's history has yet to be written, and I want to write it with all of you. I thank you for your vote. I look forward to serving as your governor come January next year. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, and thank you to all the candidates for being here tonight. Thank you very much to you at home for watching. We also want to thank our friends at the Bangor Daily News and Michael Shepard. And he didn't get a chance to mention this. There was a moment in the debate when somebody mentioned him as a commentator. He'd probably bristle at that. He's one of the best reporters in this state, so thank you to Mike. Pleasure to work with you as always. And a reminder, please watch us here on CBS 13 and Fox 23 all election night long next Tuesday. Our website as well, WGME.com, and on our page on Facebook, whatever screen you prefer, we will be there for you on election night. Please vote between now and next Tuesday as well. Or actually, early voting's over, so vote next Tuesday and tune in on Tuesday as well. Thank you to the candidates.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.